Winning Plays is brought to you by Fanduel, the exclusive wagering partner of the CLNS Media Network.
All right, Winning Plays back yet again as we enter the NBA dog days of August. My name is Brian Robb, joined by Souichi Terada of Mass Live. We're brought to you here by Fanduel. And Souichi, we did it. We got to August here. The NBA is at as close to a standstill as you're going to see. And you're getting to experience it for the first time in Boston after what was a crazy last two offseasons. How does it feel? How does it feel to have things slow down a little bit?
It feels great. I have been telling all my friends this summer about this moment, and it's funny because I was just at AAJA, which is the Asian Journalists Association convention and everything, and people were like, "Yeah, like Celtics beat, like you've been on it for 2 full seasons now," and I'm like, "Yeah, it's been great, but it's just I explained it to like I feel like a dozen people. Like it feels like I've aged dog years in terms of like NBA beats, just because like the first big news of my Celtics beat tenure was Brad getting promoted and Danny stepping down.
Right.
Then a finals run happens the very next year. In between all of that, like a very not miraculous, but like a very impressive second half story of the Celtics becoming this juggernaut. And then the Ime stuff happens, then another East Finals run, it's been a lot, right? Like I feel like I have friends on other beats of like teams that don't make the playoffs and they're just chilling in April, and like that's when we're like grinding deep into May. So it's been fun though, I have to say. Like I don't know if this was how I expected it to go down when I took the shot, but I was like Celtics feet, a lot happens on it, and a lot has happened the past couple of years.
It really has. A lot has happened this offseason, but the Celtics luckily got their work done early here, whether it was the Kristaps Porzingis trade, and then obviously last week, Jaylen Brown officially signed his supermax extension. We heard from him at a cool press conference at MIT last week, and we also heard from Joe Mazzulla last week for the first time since the Celtics had made most of their offseason moves. And you had a piece this week. He talked about a bunch of stuff this year, coming up for this year, and you wrote a piece this week at Mass Live about him talking about the fit with Porzingis and Tatum and Brown this year. So I mean, I guess initial impressions on that in terms of Joe's comments and what stood out from you with him talking about that, and just other things he kind of hit on this week.
Yeah, and it's a little bit of Joe and a little bit of Jaylen, and my impression of that was Jaylen kind of unprompted a little bit, right? Like I feel like with a Supermax extension press conference, like you're not really getting into the weeds about the team, but Jaylen brought it up himself about wanting to kind of refine that defensive identity, right? Like I remember after Game 3 against the Heat, the Celtics kept talking about how they kind of lost that defensive identity. So Jaylen bringing it up unprompted, I thought was interesting. Especially when you consider like Marcus Smart is gone and Grant Williams is gone, right? Like those are two guys where like they're down to like they're not afraid to get a little ugly, a little physical and all those kinds of things. So you're losing two big pieces in that regard. So I thought that was kind of interesting in terms of what Joe said about the fit with Jason and Jaylen, though. Like I think that's kind of your core, right, going forward. Like Porzingis is locked up for a few more years. Obviously, Jason's going to get his supermax next summer. So you're looking at those three guys and how they fit. And I feel like you gotta like it, right? Like you got two wings who can go score the ball, and you got Porzingis who can shoot the ball and is a big time rim protector. At least he was last year. So I think you look at those pieces, you feel good about it, and then you just kind of, I feel like for the Celtics, like you just kind of have to hope for the best at this point. Like you're going to get another shot probably in the playoffs as a contender. And you're just hoping, in my opinion, B-Rob at least, like I just think Jaylen and Jason just need to elevate their game to superstar, like championship level play. Right. And like, obviously Jason struggled in the 2022 finals against the Warriors. Like, I just think he just needs to take over like one of these superstars, and if you're going to win it all. And I just think that it boils down to that. Like the fit and all that kind of stuff is obviously very interesting to talk about and important to talk about, but at the end of the day, like it comes down to Jason and Jaylen, I think.
Yeah, it does. And it's like, I agree with you. It's fascinating to hear Jaylen talking about, the defense stuff, like getting back to that when like adding Porzingis on paper, that's like an offense first move. Even though there are underrated parts of his game defensively, perhaps, like this is a move to make the Celtics like an offensive juggernaut, and then have good size at a lot of positions, but certainly a couple spots on the floor where teams can easily attack, whether it's the pick and roll or whatnot by going around Porzingis in the past. Whether he can kind of clean up that part of his game to make them still be like a top 5 defense, I'm sure is the goal with this group for this year. That remains to be seen. But yeah, with Jaylen, Jason, it's, no more deferring to Smart in big moments, or like not even referring to him, like no more Smart taking over in big moments by his choice. Like this is like, but it is, I think, like in order, there has to be a degree of chemistry. And that was funny. Like I was watching, you go down into the weeds this week, some deep rabbit holes this week, and someone randomly posted a clip of like Luka and Porzingis playing together in Dallas, and they were. And it was a compilation of all the times that Luka didn't pass to Porzingis. Like when I opened and just took a jump shot himself. It was like a 5 or 10 minute clip, because there were rumors of like chemistry issues between those two at the time. And then you can kind of see that. So it's going to be fascinating to me seeing like, okay, like we go now into this year, like Tatum, like everyone has their money. Everyone should be happy here. So how quickly does that, trio collectively, meld together well, play off each other well, or is it going to be like a clunky fit? Like I don't know, like it should be great, but that's the question we're going to be, waiting a few months to dive into here.
Yeah, and I just think my big question mark still after the Smart trade is like, what does the playmaking look like as a team? Just because obviously we're talking a lot about these 3 players, and then Jason has improved in that area. Jaylen is kind of he is kind of what he is, right? As a scorer and a playmaker at this point in his career. He's already 26. You'd hope, the assist to turnover ratio gets better, all those things. But it's just, right, like, and we're talking about Joe's comments a little bit, like Derrick White as a starting point guard, right? Like Derrick, love him as a player. He showed what he can be when he is that point guard. When Marcus was out, he won Eastern Conference Player of the Week. All these good things. I'm still curious though to see how that playmaking aspect looks like as a team, because right, like if Smart wasn't your best playmaker, he was at least top 2 in my opinion. And so how does that look like next year? Just because you don't, right, like obviously, like you said, Jason and Jaylen, like there's no more deferring to Marcus in the big moments, but at the same time, like all those possessions before the big moments, like you just don't want to tire them out throughout the whole game and ask them to play make the whole time. So it's just, I'm still curious to see what that looks like. I think it's going to take some adjusting too on both ends of the floor without Marcus, obviously. So I think you're going to see the Celtics kind of work through those kinks throughout training camp, early parts of the season. But right, like the big criticism at times of the Celtics was that playmaking aspect. I don't necessarily, I don't necessarily think that has been addressed thus far. So I'm curious to see what that looks like in a couple months here.
Yeah, I mean, it's clearly a huge bet on Derrick White on that front of being like, listen, this is potentially addition by subtraction here with Smart to a degree, of terms of like the ball is going to be in Derrick White's hands more. And that's a better thing for this team overall, given, Smart obviously adds a lot to the table, but he can also, take a step back on a variety of fronts when he's trying to do too much. Or I think we saw turnover wise, there'd be 3 or 4 times a game at times during the playoffs. You're just like, what is that pass? Like, what is going on here? Where we turn to ourselves, each other on press row. And now White isn't a perfect player, but I think there are fewer of those moments. I think he's like probably better at staying in his lane more and can maybe play off those guys a bit better than Smart in terms of like, if you leave, now that you have Porzingis now, that's White is your 4th option on the floor at that times. Like he can make teams pay more in that spot than Smart could, if you will, from a, whether he set those guys up or he's cutting off ball or whatever. So that, from that standpoint, the bet makes sense, but it all has to kind of, what those, I think I agree with you, like what those guys do themselves is just as important, if not more important than, how White fits into that role.
Yeah, and I think in talking about Derrick really quick, like he mentioned this in talking on ESPN the other day, like point guard is not necessarily like a new role for him, right? Like he's played it plenty in his career. Like he was averaging 5.6 assists with the Spurs in 49 games before he got traded to the Celtics. So I'm not too worried about that part, I guess. And Derrick, throughout his career, has kind of played with talented guards next to him with guys like DeJounte Murray. So it's at this point it's an unknown. Like Derrick could be great in that role. And I think I think it's very fair to say he's one of the elite role players in the league. So just asking for a little bit more out of him. And I think he's kind of at the point of his career where you feel comfortable doing so because he has delivered so much.
It is. I mean, we talked about it countless times last year. Like, this team was hurt by having him on the bench too much. And there's like the eye test said that, and like the on off stuff said that, like that was all clear. And this, if anything, makes life a lot easier for Joe Mazzulla on that front in terms of managing egos, managing, unclear decisions at times. Like, all right, who am I going to stick with in this game? What's the best combination here? All this stuff should be simpler now. And I don't know. I mean, because we got like Joe was, I mean, if you talk about who has the pressure on them this season, or who has, like, it's great that he has the full summer now to get ready. He's not going to be thrown into the fire as much. I think all that stuff would do well for Joe Mazzulla. But now I think the pressure will be on him even more now, because everything will be a little bit more clear cut. There should be fewer mistakes that he can make from a lineup standpoint. So it'll be more of being like, okay, can he kind of put the pieces of the puzzle together here as far as the system goes, and maybe be a little bit better at adapting, because obviously the window now is more refined than ever, given the money that's been handed out.
Yeah, he has like a full assistant coaching staff he can lead on, and it's just right. Like the Braves ran from the 2022 finals to the end of the 2023 East finals, which is insane when you think about it. So I just think he's in a much better position. And the thing about Derrick and crunch time that I always found funny was there's criticism of that, and he does play a little bit of crunch time in Game 6 of the East finals happened. So
Right.
sometimes the ball just bounces your way in these karmic ways that are really funny.
All right, let's take a break here to hear from our sponsor, Fanduel. Football season is about to kick off, and Fanduel is giving you the chance to win all season long. Because right now, when you bet on a Super Bowl winner, you get bonus bets every time they win in the regular season. So just pick any team to win the Super Bowl, and you'll get bonus bets for every victory. And you can use those bonus bets on spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So just head over to fanduel.com/Boston and start earning bonus bets with America's #1 sportsbook. That's FanDuel.com/Boston. It is. It's so. I mean, that play will never be forgotten now, but it's just such like a sidebar to everything that happened now. Whereas opposed if one game goes differently there, then that becomes like an iconic top 5 play in Celtics history, maybe, if they make it finish off that comeback. But like I said, Derrick White front and center for that part. Probably should have been front and center for a few other times in the playoffs, and now we know he will be. One guy who won't be front and center is Justin Champagne here, who was waived earlier this week. Celtics now have 2 open roster spots, along with a couple unguaranteed spots with Ben and Luke Cornett. Luke, I feel like, is maybe the safest guy in the team right now. In terms of, I don't
know. B-Rob, there hasn't been a Brad Stevens-like tweet.
That's true. We're still waiting for that this summer. But based on Brad did say he liked the big situation, which is funny. But he seems like that is a safe deathbed here. But there are some roster spots to deal with. There's still a 2-way spot to deal with here. And we had some new juicy rumors this week, Souichi. One of your Detroit guys is potentially weighing off for the Celtics right now.
Zvi Mikhailuk, I believe I said that correctly. That's how I heard it. That's how I remember hearing it, at least, which was around 4 years ago. B-Rob and I talked about this off screen. I don't have too much of a scouting report on that. I wasn't watching, as you might imagine, I was not watching too much Pistons basketball in 2019-20 when they were very irrelevant. Caught a few games. He was a good shooter then. I think he shot like 40-ish% from 3. I was actually kind of surprised he was only 26, but yeah, I don't really have much else to add besides the fact that he formerly played for the Lakers, as you mentioned earlier today on MassLive.com, and he's mulling a contract offer, which at least is kind of interesting in as you said, the dog days of summer.
Yeah, he takes a lot of threes, and that's Joe Mazzulla's like, all right, give me that guy. No, he's 6'7". He's been around the block a little bit. I guess he had a pretty solid end of the year in Charlotte, but he's played for like 6 different teams in 6 years. So that kind of tells you the story of like he's a fringe NBA player at this point. But Yeah, it's I don't know, it's fascinating, Suchi, just in terms of where this roster is at right now. Malcolm Brogdon was another guy who Joe Mazzulla talked about last week. It looks like
Mhm.
he is going to be on the roster at least to start this year. They're trying to mend fences there, if you will, or he's trying to get over what was a tough situation for him. But
Mhm.
piecing together the rest of this roster, a guy even like Banton he's a very like light guarantee for him, so he might not be on the team. So they're keeping a lot of flexibility right now in terms of how they're building this roster out.
Yeah.
And we also still have one big name still left out there who was on last year's team and the old Blake Griffin. Um, who I don't know, is he just waiting for training camp to go through for the week and then sign on board here? I'll last year get
That's
past
what
the worst of the drills.
that's what happened last year, though I guess that was more of a Rob injury situation.
Right.
B Rob, it's just I feel like with the roster, like it's not a bad place to be because in comparison, right? Like realistically, you're not giving, you're not like offering a lot of money or anything by any means, especially with the salary cap situation. So if you're a Celtics fan though, like you would much rather prefer to be in this spot where you're just waiting to fill out the roster versus what the Suns have, where they were able to sign some like notable names like an Eric Gordon. Shout out to my guy Yuta Watanabe, a 3 and potential D guy. But yeah, that's because they the Suns have opportunities for minutes and being a rotation player. Whereas like obviously with the Celtics, like the rotation is pretty much more or less set. Like obviously you would like I said, if I was a Celtics fan, like I would like to see like a playmaking guard or something like that, or maybe a little bit more big man insurance. Though Brad, as you said, likes the big man rotation right now. So there are
They
some
still need another
areas.
guy though. I feel like if they go
Yeah,
in,
right.
like
Hmm.
you can say that, but I feel like one injury and it's like becomes like like
Yeah,
which
yeah,
is
yeah.
almost a guarantee that there will be an injury to one of those
Yeah,
guys.
but I just feel like it's so hard to thread the needle of like, like I remember when he talked to Montrezl Harrell, who unfortunately tore his ACL, but like I remember when he talked to
Right.
Harrell earlier last season, it was like I feel like the Celtics front office is being pretty transparent in the idea of like, we would love to have you as an insurance option, but like just know that playing time is far from guaranteed. And like, sure, there are some veterans like a Blake Griffin where like that pitch works, but like a lot of players are gonna want to be right? Like a lot of productive younger players are still going to be looking for that next contract and like making an impact on the league. So that's just a tough sell. But like I said, you would much rather be in that situation where you feel pretty relatively comfortable with your top 7, 8, 9 players versus what the Suns had, where they were pretty much forced to fill out the roster on that minimum contracts and kind of go from there.
Are there any free agents out there that catch your eye at all? I mean, we know there's like the Christian Woods and the Kelly Oubre's that wrote out there. I feel like there's no chance they would look at the Celtics for the
Yeah.
reason you mentioned because there's just like
Mhm.
those guys want to run their next contract and they're not necessarily going to get more than 10 minutes per game in Boston. But is there a below the radar guy or just someone who you're like, oh yeah, I've always kind of liked that guy, like even
Not Mm, not off the
or
top
the
of my head, honestly. I honestly thought Pat Bev would have been like a good fit. Like I know some people don't like him, but like on a vet minimum, like it's kind of hard to say no to a guy like that. It's kind of crazy to see what, like you said, what happened with Christian Wood. Like I remember when he became a free agent with the Pistons, he was very much so like, ooh, this guy could be interesting. But like the league collectively has kind of been like, yeah, we don't really like what you do in terms of like winning basketball. It's just crazy to see the league kind of come to that consensus, I guess. But yeah, like I just as of right now, nobody really jumps out to me, B Rob. I don't know if you had any names in mind.
No, and to be honest, it's probably guys that are still on rosters. Like you look at
Yeah.
like a couple of teams in the league right now that like OKC are going to have to cut like 4 or 5 guys before by the
Mhm.
end of the start of the season. The Spurs are going to have to cut like 3 guys right now, or
Mhm.
trade 3 guys. And so, and I think honestly, that's probably why a lot of teams are kind of waiting on making any moves right now because it's like, all right, all these guys, they're out there for a reason. Um, and if you're a Celtics, especially you're like a Celtics that are well into the luxury tax right now, like any signing you make is actually costing the team like
Mhm.
$10 million when you factor in like the tax penalties. So it's like, all right, we got to make sure we really, like this guy, or they have to be willing to come in on a non-guarantee, which is probably not a lot of guys are willing to do that yet that could potentially contribute. So, yeah, I'm fascinated. I keep an eye on the Thunder and like the Spurs among other teams in terms of like stockpiled young guys that maybe one of them becomes free and you make a run at one of those, or you trade a second round pick for them instead of getting waived, but that probably isn't going to happen till like October or something like that.
Yeah, no, it seems the Celtics, I don't know if they had a choice, but they ended up with the wrong Champagny because Julian Champagny was tearing it up for the Spurs in Summer League. So
yeah, are they twins or are they just brothers?
I believe they're twins. I believe they're twin brothers. Yeah, Justin didn't have a great summer league, I feel like, right? Like he didn't really shoot it that well. Yeah, I guess he rebounded decently, but I was kind of like, it was a little underwhelming, I guess, especially for a guy you were hoping, could develop into something a little bit. And, to his credit, like he at least played a few games with the Raptors, two-way guy. So it was I guess I expected to see a little bit more, and I was a little surprised there wasn't more. But it was funny though, B-Rob. I was talking to Will Liu, my twin in Toronto, and then we were talking a little bit. And I was just like, there are a lot of Raptors on this team, like former Raptors, very randomly, like Delano Banton, Brissett, Champagny, and I was like, what's Brad cooking here?
Raptors South,
yeah,
or Raptors, further east. Yeah, that's a good point. I hadn't thought about that. There is like a pretty long list of guys, and then even, I guess Hernan Gomez went the other way. He went up to Toronto. They're just a little back and forth shuttle between those two teams right now. But yeah, it is. I agree with you on terms of Champagny. Like he just didn't, for a third-year NBA guy, it's like you want to see more from this, especially if he's competing for one of the last spots on the roster at a position that you're going to want some solid depth at. So, yeah, so we'll see. Again, they might fill one of those spots this week. I'm sure they have a few other like feelers out there, contract offers out there for guys to just come into camp and compete for it. But they're certainly keeping their doors open right now, or opportunities open right now as far as keeping the roster flexibility going. All right, let's wrap up with this. Jaylen Brown's massive presser for his supermax extension. What stood out from you from that whole experience? Anything he said, anything the team said about him, and how that's going to kind of turn around to this upcoming season?
This is not basketball related, but the MIT Media Lab is pretty cool.
Yeah.
I didn't realize the security was so good. I met up with a friend after and she just walked in and I was like, I'm pretty sure you can't just walk in. Like it's like a police officer here. In terms of the actual basketball though, kind of what I said about the defense, it was cool to hear what Jaylen said about what he wanted to do with his generational wealth. Brad got no questions, which he was quick to point out after the news conference, which was also funny. But yeah, I don't know. It felt like a pretty typical news conference in terms of like being like, yeah, I just signed the richest contract in NBA history and I plan to be part of this core. Obviously, things change in the NBA very quickly. He's under contract for 6 more years now. So, that's a very long time in NBA. So, but yeah, I thought it was a cool experience. I thought it was cool for the kids, right? Like the bridge program that Jaylen did. The only thing I want to add to the Jaylen extension that I always find funny with these big ones, and it reminds me a little bit of like a Mike Conley, which I think was in like 2015.
Yeah.
Like it's just the discourse around the Jaylen contract, and Brad even said he was optimistic at Summer League. Like it was expected to happen. Like everyone, if you were paying attention, expected it to happen. But then the moment it does get signed, people are like, whoa, that's so much money, blah, blah, blah. And obviously we can debate the merits of if Jaylen Brown is worth a supermax contract and everything. But it's just, I always find it funny that this is expected to happen. Everyone is optimistic it'll happen, and it does happen. And then the overwhelming reaction is still like negative just because it's the richest contract in NBA history, right? Like it happens with quarterbacks in NFL too. So I always just think that discourse ends up being like a little strange just because like everyone knows it's coming. And when it does come, there's like this, like, not necessarily to say it happened with Jaylen, like all of the discourse was negative, but like a lot of people are like, why is he getting this much money? Is Jaylen Brown worth the richest contract in NBA history? And I'm like, that's just how salary caps work, right? It's just these things keep going up. when Jason signs his, supermax extension next year, like it's going to be more than Jaylen's. Like it's a nice thing for him to have for a little bit, but it's just, I always just think that discourse is a little funny, and I just wanted to say that just because if you're paying attention, like this was bound to come regardless.
Yeah, the timing of Jaylen playing the worst playoff series of his career was very poor for him for that, because it takes away the big picture of what you laid out of being like, okay, this is once he made that all NBA team, this was gonna happen. And this was a situation where that the Celtics were happy this happened, because no matter what you think about Jaylen Brown, whether you think he's worth for that contract or not, like fully, like it's a hell of a lot better spot to be in than him entering a contract year right now. And him having, and having that uncertainty hang over the team this year, as well as the possibility that he walks away for nothing, which who knows what that road would have been. A fascinating road this year from a drama standpoint, but as far as a team building standpoint, the Celtics would far prefer the route they've taken here.
I think I speak for Celtics fans and media and everybody involved, and I think we're okay without a little bit of drama for at least a little bit, right? It's good for the content, I guess.
That would have just been so repetitive too. That would just
right. It was just, I mean, even last year it felt, hey Jaylen, what do you think about next year? And he kind of gave non-committal answers, right? And then we had to keep talking about it for at least, after January, I want to say. So I'm glad, I'm sure Celtics fans should be glad. And I've said this on this pod, B-Rob, I just think the narrative for players is just so wishy-washy, and right. We heard in the first couple rounds, Jaylen was actually better than Jason. Then now he can't dribble with his left hand. And, Jason kind of went through a similar thing last year, post-finals. Charles Barkley is like taking shots at him on an NHL broadcast. Like, I just think, right, like some of these criticisms are fair, but it's also a product of of the Celtics being a successful team and playing in the East Finals however many times in recent years, the NBA Finals in 2022. Like when you're on that big of a stage, sure, it sucks to struggle, but like at least you're on that stage compared to other guys who are just watching at home and are hoping they can't get to that stage. So it's just I understand that's how the NBA works, but I always just from afar, I guess I'm just kind of not from afar, but just from like a holistic viewpoint, I always kind of laugh at it a little bit.
Yeah, short-term memories are very much a thing in NBA storylines and criticism, but yeah, it's.
I'm sure, Jaylen is doing just fine with $300 million or however much the estimates say he's going to get over the next few years.
Well, he seems to be enjoying his time in Japan right now.
Yeah,
you'll be joining him in a couple weeks. As
I don't know if I'll see Jaylen.
Yeah, exactly. You guys won't cross paths there, but you guys can compare notes in training camp. All right, that's Souichi Terada of Mass Live. Make sure you're following him on Twitter at SOUICHI Terada. We'll be back next week. Hopefully, there's some stuff to talk about in August, Souichi. We're gonna be waiting for that next two-way signing, or waiting for that World Cup to come around the corner. We got Porzingis, we got Brissett, we got some big names suiting up overseas in another few weeks. But in the meantime, the hot stove NBA will have to wait, and we'll be picking our feet up a little bit here at the Winning Plays Pod. But enjoy your trip, sir. We'll be talking to you when you get back. Thank you. Thanks everyone for listening. We'll talk to you guys next week.
The CLNS Media Network is powered by Fanduel. Sign up at FanDuel.com/Boston and get in on the action with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed.